Thank you, Becky, and Carlo and Amanda, and all those who are making this service possible online. And thank you for joining us as we come to you from many different homes. We're living under conditions of increased isolation, as you know. Cigna Research, a company that reports on polling, reports that over 60% of North Americans say that they are lonely. In some people, it leads to substance abuse, depressive symptoms, and suicidal ideation, vulnerability to other diseases, and sleep deprivation. And COVID-19 is making all of this worse, of course. On a lighter note, a senior posted this as he looked around his room. My microwave gets all heated up when people don't get social distancing. My washing machine puts a different spin on everything. And my fridge is acting cold and distant. The doorknob told me to get a grip and not to panic. The fan was more optimistic and said it would all soon blow over. Social connection is a primal human need, and there are times when life takes us through the darkest valleys, and the struggle is to find ways to cope. There's a physical deprivation, and there's also emotional and spiritual loneliness, which may be the worst of all. Do you remember the time in the life of Jesus when even his mother failed to understand him? His life and teachings had made him a public figure, and his brothers reported to their mother Mary that everybody was talking about Jesus. And they reported that he had insulted the learned scribes to their face, and the Pharisees are coming down from Jerusalem. They're very learned and spiritual men, and they say that Jesus is all wrong, and that he's blasphemous. And finally they persuaded their mother, her oldest son Jesus was deranged, and they went off to bring Jesus home. And in one of the saddest stories in the gospel, they came to a house already crowded with people, and they couldn't get near to Jesus. And they sent him a message: come home, and we will help you get better. It was signed, your loving mother and brothers. We expect a lot from our mothers, said Rudyard Kipling. If I were hanged on the highest hill, mother of mine, I know whose love would follow me still. Mother of mine, mother of mine. In this instance, his mother did not stand beside him. It was a betrayal of sorts, a loss of faith in her son that perhaps he was insane and not to be believed. And you remember the terrible answer: who is my mother and my brothers but those who do the will of God in heaven? They are my brother and sister and mother. And I wonder if the cold wind of loneliness swept into the heart of Jesus, even as he said those sad words. But of course there were others who betrayed him too. What about the people who followed him, passionately and fervently, hanging on to his every word? Some of them lined the road into Jerusalem waving palm branches, laying down their cloaks for his donkey to tread upon. There was such adulation and unfettered celebration. But a few days later, when Pilate stood Jesus on the veranda of the praetorium, crowned him with thorns and robed him with a rag, and he asked the crowd, what shall I do with this man? You remember their infamous answer: crucify him, crucify him. What about his inner circle? You remember his disciples, of whom it was said in the early part of the Gospels, they left their fishing nets, their places of employment, their roots. They left everything and followed Jesus. And in the 3 years that they were with Jesus, they'd seen the dead raised, the lepers cleansed, the blind receiving their sight, And indeed, they had left everything and followed him. But now they all left him and fled. He's betrayed with a kiss. Peter, the stalwart leader of the band, melts in the presence of a servant girl. A cock crows somewhere in the distance. Jesus turns and looks, and once again, he is alone. It's not easy to be a follower, whether you're Peter or anyone else. And nowhere are the emotions of Jesus so clearly displayed as at the time when he knelt to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane. Mark says he was greatly distressed and troubled. Jesus says, "My soul is very sorrowful, even unto death." Luke portrays the struggle even more graphically. He says that as Jesus prayed, sweat drops of blood popped out on his forehead. Our scripture reading takes place in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's not really a garden. It's an orchard where olive trees still grow. In Jesus' days, it was likely a place of business. The word Gethsemane is made up of two words, gat meaning press, and semene, oil. It was a place where olives were gathered and pressed under the weight of a stone till oil ran out and there was nothing left of the seed. It was the perfect symbol of what would happen to Jesus. He would figuratively be crushed till there was nothing left of him. Jesus was smart enough to know that that is what lay ahead. He knew the hatred of the religious elite. He knew how Romans killed their enemies. He knew he would be strung up like a criminal. But he had no choice. If he wanted to be true to truth and justice, if he wanted to be true to love for the unloved, he had to walk into the lair of the enemy. He knew one way or another, death would come. Death, the final frontier. When we speak of loneliness, isn't that the loneliest time of all? Ronald Rollheiser, an oblate priest, writes, "Several years ago I was visiting a man dying of cancer. He was dying well, though nobody dies easy. He felt a deep loneliness, even as he was surrounded by people who loved him deeply. Here's how he described it. I have a wonderful wife and children, and lots of family and friends. Someone is holding my hand almost every minute, but I'm a stone's throw away from everyone. I'm dying, and they're not. I'm inside of something into which they can't reach. It's awfully lonely, dying. A stone's throw away from everybody else. Had borrowed that phrase, a stone's throw, from Luke's account of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. There Jesus invited his disciples to pray with him. As he struggled to find strength to face his death, his disciples were blissfully asleep, or as Luke cryptically adds, while he sweated blood, he was a stone's throw away from them. How far is a stone's throw away? 40, 50 yards. Far away enough that you feel alone and out of reach. We come out of the womb alone, and we leave the earth alone. Jesus was entering a place where he was deeply and utterly alone. He prays, "Take this cup away from me." If he was thinking of death, the window of escape was closing fast. He knew that death was ahead. If that was his prayer, a prayer for escape, it was not granted to him. And he finishes his prayer in this way, in the way that all good prayer should end. Yet not my will, but yours be done. He was saying, let me be in that space emotionally, mentally, spiritually, where I should be. Let me be at peace with where I am and your purposes for my life. The question was not whether he would die, but how he would die. Now that it seemed everything was lost, would he continue to trust? What kind of spirit would he hand over at the end? Would it be gracious or bitter, forgiving or vengeful, loving or hate-filled, trusting or paranoid, hope-filled or despairing? Would he be at peace with where he finds himself? Would he be at peace with God? Any other space is very lonely. What of us, shuddering under the malevolent cloud of COVID-19, which is persistently hovering over us? Some of us are living with fear, anxiety, loneliness. What is God's purpose for your life right now? Find it and be at peace with that, and you will find strength for the way.